Hey, what's up, people? Okay, so there's a lot of people buzzing about the value of Star Wars Battlefront being a game that has no single-player story mode campaign. Many people think that being multiplayer only doesn't justify the cost of $60. However, I tend to disagree because I feel like if there's enough content within the multiplayer, then the $60 price tag is justified. So in comparison, we're going to look at a few other games which are primarily multiplayer only games that released at full retail price of $60. So starting with Titanfall, released at $60, it released with 5 game modes: Attrition, Last Titan Standing, Hardpoint, Capture the Flag, and Pilot Hunter. The game has 15 maps. Now there's no single player story campaign at all, and I would have a problem with this value because the multiplayer alone doesn't offer very much variety outside of the 5 standard game types. This means that the game severely lacked replay value, at least until some DLC started coming out, but even then, you're going to be spending more money on new maps, new modes, and forgive me if I'm mistaken here, but I mean, there's a chance that some of that stuff may have come out for free after launch. I'm not 100% sure. But regardless, the $60 price tag for what you got out of the box was pretty bad. Then there's Evolve, launched at full retail price of $60 as well. Again, only has 5 game modes: Defend, Evacuation, Hunt, Nest, and Rescue. Now, one of these game modes has an offline solo mode that you can play, and it does have a plot and a story behind it, but it's not like your traditional offline campaign where, you know, you progress through levels and follow a specific narrative along the way. It's more so just a single player version of the multiplayer modes, but with a few more objectives and a few more things going on within the map, such as, you know, more wildlife and things like that. So I see it in a way as kind of like a half-assed attempt at a single player experience. Again though, it's a game that people buy and play specifically for the multiplayer, so not much time is spent playing solo at all. Then there's Destiny, okay? Destiny launched at $60, has 3 main game modes. There's the Crucible, there's Patrol, and there's Story. So here, if you count all 7 PvP modes, plus the story mode, plus the free roam mode, you get a total of 9 different game types that you can play. And that's including free roam, which some may even disagree that shouldn't even count as a game mode since there's no real objectives or anything like that, but for the sake of this video, we'll count it. So Destiny's better than Evolve, better than Titanfall. It has 9 game modes. But Destiny only has 10 maps for PvP and only 4 for story. So even at 14 maps, it's got more game modes than the other 2, but it has less maps than the other 2 games I mentioned. Now Destiny does have a story mode, but you play through it and it feels extremely repetitive, right? It's never really exciting. All of the missions basically feel the same. There's no real diversity in the objectives. Enemies are just basically bullet sponges, but don't really require any tactics other than shoot, dodge, rinse, repeat. I mean, I know a lot of people love Destiny, but it's a pretty bland and boring game in my opinion. Again, heavily focused on the multiplayer aspect of it, but without actually providing any real type of deep multiplayer experience. And yes, that's a matter of opinion here, but it would be hard to convince me that Destiny provides any type of expansive multiplayer experience. I just don't see it. Even the story mode is meant to be played online cooperatively with other people, and like Evolve, as I mentioned, I feel like Destiny delivers a half-assed attempt at a single player or even a co-op campaign with nothing more than a mediocre storyline and bland missions. Now, one of the games that confuses me the most though is Battlefield 4. Now again, it launched at full retail price. I didn't see anyone complaining about the value of this game. Granted, it did come with a single player experience. However, the campaign only takes an average of less than 6 hours to beat. After that, even the multiplayer was lacking in content as far as my opinion goes. It had 7 very generic game modes. So you had Conquest, Domination, Obliteration, Diffuse, Team Deathmatch, Rush, and Squad Deathmatch, and only 10 maps. So with these multiplayer game types and the story mode combined, Battlefield had 8 different game modes to choose from, which is better than Titanfall and Evolve, but it falls short of what Destiny offers, and as I pointed out, that's really not that much. Now, out of all the games I mentioned, I think Battlefield 4 does offer the most value for $60. The single player story might be short, but at least it's good. The game types in multiplayer might be generic, but at least there's 7 to choose from and not only 5. And the fact that it has large-scale battles, destructible environments, it all adds to the uniqueness among other things. I mean, it has a lot of weapons and vehicles and just a few other things going for it, right? So I'd say out of all of them, the best value is Battlefield for $60. However, it still doesn't have an abundance of content on the disc. So it seems to me like, with the exception of Titanfall, which felt severely lacking in value, the rest of these games all have a pretty even and basic amount of gameplay elements contributing to their overall value. Games with fewer maps have story modes, and games with little to no story modes tend to have more maps and more game modes. And they vary in the amount of different types, but they average about 6 different game types each. Everyone has their own opinion on what value is, but for the most part, the quantity of content games are offering these days are pretty much standard. Now for Star Wars Battlefront, launching at $60, it's launching with 9 multiplayer game modes: Supremacy, Cargo, Droid Ruin, Walker Assault, Blast, Drop Zone, Heroes vs Villains, Hero Hunt, and Fighter Squadron, with 12 maps at launch, 2 more free DLC maps coming shortly after, and that's just multiplayer, because with the co-op mode you have an additional 4 modes. You have Training Mode, Survival Mode, Battles, and Hero Battles, and these can be played solo, online, offline or online split screen, offline split screen or online co-op, and they're called missions where they have, sort of like storylines that go along with them. So at launch you're basically getting 13 different game modes to choose from, and a few of them, like Hero Hunt and Fighter Squadron, are pretty unique in their own way and not just typical standard type of first-person shooter gameplays. You're getting more maps than Battlefield, more maps than Destiny, more maps than Titanfall. I mean, it just adds to the overall diversity. Now there's no single player campaign story to play through, but in my opinion this game doesn't need it. There is plenty of Star Wars stories that you can play through, read, watch, as far as, video games, movies, books, all that stuff. This game is meant to just put you in the action of the battle in a competitive nature. I mean, would the game be better if it had a single player campaign? Possibly, I'm not going to deny that. However, if the games want to neglect putting time and effort into a single player story so they can focus solely on releasing a top-notch multiplayer experience, then I'm okay with that. Why? Because this game it's not meant for a single player experience. Leave the epic single player stuff to games that want to focus on that aspect of it, but for these big multiplayer competitive shooters, single player can be left out for all most people care. Even if there were a single player campaign, you'd play it, you'd beat it, and you'd be done with it. You'd never look at it again. Multiplayer is where people spend most of their time, even on games that have single player stories. So if that's what the fans are focusing on, then for Star Wars Battlefront, that's what the devs are going to focus on. It was the right decision in my opinion, and they're putting in enough multiplayer content to make the game worth its price tag. Now let's not forget, multiplayer is where the actual replay value is. So if DICE decided to include a story campaign in the game, then there's a high chance we would see about half the amount of game modes in the multiplayer, putting it more on par with games like Destiny and Evolve. Now some people might prefer that, but me personally, I don't prefer that. I would much rather have a heavier focus on multiplayer with more game modes there than basically cut that in half just to have a 5 or 6 hour story mode to play through once and be done with it. Now I love campaigns more than anyone else. Not more than, but just as much as anyone else. But I'd be kidding myself if I said I wasn't buying Battlefront for the multiplayer. That's what the game is centered around. As a consumer, I'm glad that the developers have decided to put 100% of their focus in the gameplay elements that people will be naturally spending most of their time on, which is multiplayer. That just makes the most sense to me. So yeah, in the end, I think Battlefront is definitely worth the $60 price tag. I feel like a lot of people developed an unfair opinion based on the beta, where we only got to play 3 different modes on 3 different maps. They came to their opinions on the game's overall value based on that alone, which, I mean, it's just not fair considering the fact that there's still a ton more content that the game has to offer. But anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you agree or disagree with this. Everyone has their own opinions on the matter, but if you do disagree, I would like to know if you would be willing to sacrifice nearly half of the multiplayer content in order to get a 6-hour campaign in the game, and why. But that's going to be it for me for now. I'm Vile Self. Click that like button, subscribe if you're new. Later, villains.